Hey, what's up guys? Eddie here as DJ Elevan from JaetMusicStudios. Today we're going to look at a quick technique just around pulse width modulation, but in Sylenth. This technique can be achieved by employing one of the important sound design principles. Remember, there are no tricks, there are only techniques. The sound that we finish with is playing in the background, so let's get to it. Okay, so we're here in Sylenth. And I've got Smexoscope here. This is a free oscilloscope that I will leave a link to in the description. I've got it up here, so if I play a note, you can see exactly what kind of wave I'm playing. So default Sylenth after you Control J or initialize the preset. Just one oscillator with one voice playing a fixed saw wave. If I just go to part B and I play a pulse wave, one voice and isolate it, solo it, you see we've got a square wave or a pulse wave, but there's no way that I can actually modulate the width of that pulse. I can play quarter pulse, sounds different, I can play half pulse, the difference being the width of the pulses. Changing the phase has a variation to the pitch of the wave, but doesn't actually modulate the pulse width. So how do we achieve this? An important sound design principle is derived from inverting waves. What do I mean by this? If I copy part A1 to part A2, I have exactly the same thing. Notice what happens. If you look on the oscilloscope and you listen carefully, you might hear that the volume has increased. I'll take it away. Well, the amplitude doubles. And it doubles because we're playing the exact same wave with the exact same phase. And if I change that phase, you get a thickening effect, but the volume varies according to the amount of phase that I change. Watch it again. So what if I invert one of these? They're both retriggering, both have a fixed phase, and I play it. I get absolutely nothing. And look what happens when I alter the phase. You can see that I generate a pulse wave by playing two saw waves, having one inverted with varying phase. You modulate the pulse width by varying the phase of one oscillator. How do I set that to an LFO? If I go and modulate the phase of part A, let's just say free up here, I'll turn it up until it sounds pissed. If we actually look at the oscilloscope, the pulse width isn't modulating. But if you listen carefully, you can hear that it sounds just like altering the phase as if we have a fixed pulse wave. So I'll set that to pulse, put it to part B. Up here, LFO A. So that sounds nothing like pulse width modulation as if we were to do it like this. So how do we achieve this? Well, there's a couple of ways. The first way I'm going to show you is to copy the oscillator 2A to oscillator B2. I'm going to take this away and I'm going to take this away. I'm going to turn this off, I'm going to turn this off. Now we should have exactly the same result as playing two saw waves, one inverted through the same oscillator part A. And if I move this phase, we get pulse width modulation. Therefore, if I set this to modulate one or both of the phases, we achieve pulse width modulation. So how does this help us as sound designers? Well, there's a couple of different ways. It depends on what kind of sound you want to make. So I'll just kind of come up with a quick MIDI clip. Okay, so I've come up with this quick MIDI clip. It sounds a bit like a Nintendo. An easy sound to make from this chord progression will be a pad. Let's make one of those. going to control the sound coming all through the same filter. Make it a low pass because it's a pad and pads love low pass filters. A little bit of drive, small bit of resonance. Okay, so that sounds like a pad coming out of a Nintendo 64. How do we make this better? Well, you can do the same old sound design tricks that you always do to thicken a pad. Add some voices, add some detune. Before I do that, I'm going to set the pulse width modulation, and then I'm going to thicken the sound. That's for part A. Part B, I'll do with a different wave, maybe a triangle wave, with a slightly different rate, so it's more interesting. To do also is set chorus while it's this thin so you can hear exactly what you're doing. Okay, so I can bring that in later. Now I know it's going to sound nice. Okay, so let's thicken the timbres up. Give it some voices. Say 5 would be good. Bit of detune. So that's one way to do it. A different way to achieve a much thicker sound would be to take all of this off. Okay, so now it sounds like a couple of saws. I'm going to invert one of them. This might be easier to hear if I have a single tone. Playing a single tone, I'm going to set the pulse width that I want. I'm going to do the same for part B. In doing this, you get a much thicker sound if you set the phases different in part B than to part A. It's the difference in phase that gives us that thickness. That's what detuning is. And from here, I'm just going to increase the fine tuning. Only a very subtle amount. And get that semi-mosquito effect. Just a very small amount. The other one I'm going to leave as is. I have left the pulse width modulation there, but you can set that again if you want to. And from here, I'm going to thicken it up as before. Say this one 5, this one 5. And this one having a different amount of voices. Okay, so that's sounding pretty thick just for one tone. Let's try it with our chord progression. You could probably go even further, I think. Do that. That's not bad. Let's try it with some external processing. Maybe just a little bit of distortion. Some nice pentode distortion on here, nice and round, just a little bit. Just a little bit. It's really easy to hear when you've gone too far with distortion with the filter down. If you listen to this. Yeah, it's much easier to hear with the filter down. You hear those overtones, that's not what we're after. And of course, beautiful pad deserves to go through Echo Boy. And a nice dual 1/8, 1/8 dotted, bit of feedback, nice mix. Yeah. Amp envelope isn't too good, I'll just keep that. Maybe change this to open. Oh, that's a nice one. Okay, so that's how you did some pulse width modulation in Sylenth. Now that you've got the science of the sound down, you can experiment with all kinds of different ways. You can change the octaves, change the tuning, go further with the detuning. Let's just change the octaves of this, take it down. I'll get rid of that. Ooh. Isn't that sound absolutely beautiful? If you're going to do that, I personally would set the filters independent. Solo it. This one's a little lower. And then you have more control over. There you go, guys. That's how you do pulse width modulation in Sylenth. There's no limit to what you can apply this technique on. You can apply it to leads, plucks, pads, bass pads, canonics, effects. You can do absolutely crazy effects with this, with some hyper modulation with the pulse width. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that you could achieve this with this important sound design principle and not think it was impossible due to the fixed architecture of Sylenth. Happy music making, and I'll see you in the next one.